Thanks.
So yeah, how about I start with intro to yourselves and also Ellipsis Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Eugene. I'm one of the co-founders at Ellipsis Labs. We built a bunch of different things in DeFi, companies in run for almost 2 years now, but our flagship product is Phoenix, which is a limit order book spot DEX on Solana. The whole exchange is fully on-chain. Depending on the day, usually between number 3 and number 10 in terms of daily spot volume across all DEXs, across all chains, and we're the only ones with profitable market makers and no incentives. My background is originally in math, and I spent about 4 years in Silicon Valley product engineering. Been in crypto for 3 years now.
Yeah, cool. Because like the talks in the morning, they mentioned like Monad and Naive, they're kind of new ecosystem, and they're pretty fast. So even like faster than Solana in some ways. So they try to say that there will be some new type of projects coming out, like on-chain, fully on-chain, EVM, audible DEX. Just curious your thought on like are there possibility of different types of DEX?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm really excited about for DeFi generally. So Phoenix today, or certainly when we were building it a year and a half ago, the only place we could put it was Solana, because it's the only place where the throughput is high enough to drive the fees low enough to make it viable for active market makers to place and cancel quotes in the same way that they do in the traditional HFT world. And then as the supply of block space increases through more layer 1s or layer 2s that are focused on performance, we really should see more applications show up that actually take advantage of this. So it's taken a long while for this to actually happen on Solana, where if you look at the Solana ecosystem from like 2021, the vast majority of the applications that got any sort of usage there were pretty much like copy-paste jobs from Ethereum. And it doesn't actually make a ton of sense because, yes, the fees are a lot lower, but also you can do so much more on a less constrained compute environment. And so you don't need to copy over Aave. Maybe there's like a better, more efficient borrowing mechanism or a mechanism that the users will prefer that's only possible to build when you have the throughput and the low latency, low jitter of a high performance blockchain. And I think Monad's ecosystem development, I don't know too much about it, but they seem to be targeting some of these new use cases. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, because you mentioned we can like make some improvements based on current DeFi protocols. Can you like elaborate more on that? Like what kind of improvement? Like, because we have more speakers later about the DEX, but just curious, what do you think is the most important feature to be improved in terms of DEX design right now?
Well, there's a lot of dimensions on which you can measure decentralized exchange or DeFi in general. One that we're really focused on is efficiency, which goes back to quality of liquidity. So when someone comes to the DEX and wants to make a trade, how much slippage are they taking? What sort of spread are they crossing? How do we enable market makers to give as tight a spread as possible? Because their job in a world where there's multiple market makers is to compete with the other market makers to provide the best possible price or take the lowest possible edge, and that's sort of what the limit order book model gives you. Comparing to like an AMM where it's very difficult for the LPs to compete with each other. They mostly act together. It's not exactly true as it was true in the XY equals K world, not quite true in the concentrated liquidity world. But I think in general, ways to facilitate competition between different actors is almost always good for finance. We see this in on-chain markets like on Phoenix. We also see this in off-chain markets like the block builder market, for example, where it's relatively opaque, but the existence of a market and multiple, at least somewhat competent players means that the outcomes are relatively good, or at least they're relatively efficient. So to actually answer your question in DeFi, I think there's a lot more exploration that can be done on the protocol design side. I think maybe Phoenix is a good example here, where Phoenix is, I would say, like not innovative in any way whatsoever. It's like a copy-paste job, essentially, of this limit order book, which has existed in traditional finance basically since the advent of electronic markets decades ago. We added 0 new features. All we did was implement it in the Solana environment and put it on chain, just sort of see what happens. There's a lot of work to be done experimenting with things like programmable liquidity hooks, any ways basically that we can give advantages to the market makers and disadvantage the toxic flow. If you can do that, then the market maker is going to be providing tighter spreads, and it's going to be better for the retail user, which I think should be the user to be optimizing for.
Awesome. And Phoenix is already quite successful, but like recently there were many improvements on the Solana ecosystem level, like some more scaling solutions like we have talked in the morning, like Magic Block and also Fireside, etc. Just curious, what's the biggest change do you think is happening on Solana, and like how will it impact the Solana, like for example DeFi ecosystem, etc.
Yeah, everything is kind of in flux on Solana right now. There's a bunch of things that are happening at the same time. One of them is there's this company called Jito, which is effectively flashbots for Solana, and they build partial blocks for around 80% of the blocks. So they basically control like the top block for about 80% of the stake. And so they have a lot of control over how this MEV game develops, basically depending on how they decide to shape their auction, and it's kind of changing every day. And these are things that can make or break a protocol like ours. They can make or break the profitability of a market maker, depending on how the auction design ends up moving. Jump Trading has been working on this thing called Firedancer for a very long time, which is essentially a new Solana client written from the ground up in C. They've been working on it for quite a while now. I think this was announced at Breakpoint 2 years ago. So they've been working on it for, probably about 2 full years now. They seem to have most of the components kind of working. So it's like a new Solana client that is highly optimized pretty much at every step that might be the bottleneck. They've done a lot of stuff at the networking layer, all the way down to actual execution. And if it works, and if a large enough portion of the stake decides to run Firedancer, then you can imagine Solana's throughput increasing and the fees decreasing by like another order of magnitude, or like possibly more. And so the lower the fees are, the better it is for DeFi. The more efficient the DeFi markets are going to be. And I really view the competition not as like DeFi on Solana versus DeFi on Ethereum or versus DeFi on Arbitrum. It's more like DeFi versus Binance and DeFi versus Coinbase. And so anything we can do to get the infra to be as performant as possible and lower the costs is going to move us in that right direction.
Yeah, sorry, my mic is out of battery. Yeah, just curious, because you mentioned DeFi versus Binance and Coinbase. A lot of people like debating about SX versus DeFi. Where do you see we can achieve that future, and what's the main bottleneck here?
I think what we're already starting to see is the lines between a centralized exchange and a decentralized exchange are getting blurred. And I think this is a good thing. We're just sort of converging on a very similar architecture from 2 different sides. I think, like, for example, layer 2s today have centralized sequencers, and they will very likely continue to have things that look like centralized sequencers, even if there's some obfuscation around that. And that's basically like a centralized exchange, except with some verifiability component on top. So there's a couple of exchanges that brand themselves as verifiable centralized exchanges, like Cube and Backpack. And I don't know if they've quite gotten to the point where it is actually like verifiable and trustless. And If they really wanted to, they can't steal your money, but that's like the path that they're going towards. And I think that's also where the DeFi exchanges that are really trying to be efficient have to move in that direction as well. Where instead of maximizing for decentralization, you maximize for efficiency and then pick like the little pieces of decentralization that are super crucial, like, oh, we need this thing to be censorship resistant, so we need to have some censorship resistance gadget in there somewhere. It doesn't mean we need to be able to support like everyone around the world can have a chance to run the matching engine for 12 seconds. I just don't see why that's particularly important.
Yeah, cool. And also, as our topic is the dawn of on-chain financial, how do you think we can bring more liquidity from off-chain to on-chain, or like bootstrap more users? Because like currently, to be honest, there are too many infrastructure projects, but pretty much everyone's trying to bring more users off-chain. Just curious your thought on what types of apps or like what types of DeFi protocols you think will come up in the future that can attract more users from off-chain world?
Yeah, I would say, there's multiple ways to look at this. So I think the least ambitious way to look at this is even within crypto, the vast majority of trading volume happens on Binance and Coinbase and OKX, all these centralized exchanges. And they dominate on-chain trading by like a factor of 10. So I think like everyone who works in DeFi should probably be embarrassed by the state of things. Like these are the users who should be the most willing to try these products, and they still just don't do it. And this is not just in terms of volume, but also number of users. And now it's a little bit unfair because centralized exchanges are the on-ramp today for the vast majority of retail users, so they're going to get the first look. But to me, what this points to is the DeFi products that we have are not good enough. So we need to keep building better products on the DeFi side. Separately, there's this asset problem where most of the crypto assets are dog shit. And we need to either create more digital value that can get tokenized or find ways to bring meat-based value on-chain in some way that actually works. And I think those are both pretty difficult problems.
Yeah, pretty spicy. To say we're embarrassed, but yeah, we would love to see more progress in the future. And yeah, I have one last question. So just curious, like, what's Ellipsis Labs currently focused on, and what can we expect in the future? What kind of products are you coming up?
Yeah, you can expect a couple announcements from us in the not too distant future. I don't want to spoil all of them today, but of course we're working on the next version of Phoenix, which will no longer be like a copy-paste job from Coinbase. And we actually have something coming out in the next couple of weeks, where we've taken a detour towards the AMM land and solved, I think, an old problem over there.
Got it. Can we have more details in terms of the AMM?
Very soon, very soon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I will leave some questions to the audience, if any. Yeah. Cool. If no, like, thanks for your time. And next up, we'll have like speakers talking about AMM too, and also audible decks. Yeah, thank you.